Admiral Kethvar of the Zephyrian Empire watched the tactical display with growing satisfaction. His massive fleet of 200 warships had cornered the human rescue convoy in the Terminus Nebula. The pathetic collection of 12 human vessels, mostly cargo haulers and medical ships, hung helplessly in space before his overwhelming force. "Open a channel to the human commander," Kethvar ordered, his forearms adjusting his ceremonial armor. The bridge of his flagship, the Times Eternal Dominion *, buzzed with activity as his officers prepared for what would be a quick and decisive victory. The main screen flickered to life, revealing a tired-looking human woman in a simple military uniform. Captain Sarah Chen of the Times, Mercy's Hope Times, stared back at him with defiant eyes, despite her hopeless situation. "I am Admiral Kethvar of the Zephyrian Empire," he announced, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had never known defeat. "You are trespassing in Imperial space while attempting to provide aid to our enemies on Corvani Prime. Surrender immediately, or we will destroy every ship in your convoy." Captain Chen's expression never wavered. "Admiral, we're here on a humanitarian mission. The plague on Corvani Prime affects civilians, women, children, elderly people who have nothing to do with your war. Our medical supplies could save millions of lives." Kethvar's mandibles clicked in amusement. "How typically human, always believing your moral superiority gives you the right to interfere in galactic affairs. You humans are a young species, barely 300 years in space. You know nothing of the greater game being played here." "Maybe not," Chen replied quietly. "But we know right from wrong." The Zephyrian admiral's patience wore thin. Humans and their insufferable righteousness had been a thorn in the Empire's side for decades. These newcomers to the galactic stage somehow believed they could stand against civilizations that had ruled the stars for millennia. It was time to teach them a harsh lesson about reality. "You have 60 seconds to surrender unconditionally," Kethvar declared. "After that, we will demonstrate why the Zephyrian Empire has dominated this region for over 5,000 years. As the countdown began, Kethvar studied the human formation. Their ships were arranged in a protective circle around the medical vessels, a futile gesture that spoke to their naivety. Human technology was impressive for such a young race, but it couldn't compete with Zephyrian energy weapons and shield technology that had been perfected over millennia. "Admiral," his tactical officer reported, "long-range sensors detect no additional human ships in the system. The nearest human fleet is at least 2 days away, at maximum warp." Kethvar nodded approvingly. Intelligence had been correct. This convoy was isolated and vulnerable. The humans had made a critical error in attempting this rescue mission without proper military escort. Their compassion would be their downfall. "Sir," another officer called out, "we're receiving distress signals from the planet below. The plague situation appears to be deteriorating rapidly. Casualty estimates are approaching 8 million dead." 109. "Irrelevant," Kethvar dismissed. "The Corvanis chose to ally with human interests against the Empire. They will face the consequences of that decision. Plague or no plague." Captain Chen's voice crackled over the comm again. "Admiral, I'm begging you. Look past the politics for one moment. There are children dying down there. Our medical ships carry enough antiviral compounds to stop this plague in its tracks. Just let us deliver the supplies, and we'll leave immediately." 30 seconds, was Kethvar's only response. The Zephyrian fleet began to move into attack formation. The massive dreadnoughts took position at the front, their weapon arrays beginning to glow with deadly energy. Behind them, cruisers and destroyers spread out to ensure no human ship could escape the coming slaughter. Kethvar had commanded fleets in dozens of battles across the galaxy. He had crushed rebellions, conquered worlds, and earned the respect of the Empire's enemies through decisive victories. This engagement would be no different, a demonstration of Zephyrian supremacy that would remind the galaxy why humanity remained a minor power despite their rapid technological advancement. 10 seconds, the tactical officer announced. On the view screen, Captain Chen closed her eyes for a moment, as if gathering strength for what was to come. When she opened them again, there was something different in her expression, not defeat, but a quiet confidence that made Kethvar pause. "Admiral," she said softly, "you're right about one thing. We humans are young compared to your empire. We've only been in space for a few centuries, but in that short time, we've learned something important about ourselves. Time's up, Kethvar declared, raising his hand to signal the attack. Fire at will. The order was halfway to his lips when every sensor on the bridge suddenly screamed warnings. Space itself seemed to shimmer directly between the Zephyrian fleet and the human convoy. What appeared to be empty vacuum began to ripple like water. And then, impossibly, a massive shape began to materialize. What in the name of the eternal void? Kethvar gasped. The ship that decloaked before them defied every expectation. It was easily 3 times the size of his own flagship. A behemoth of angular black metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Strange geometric patterns covered its hull, and weapon ports dotted its surface like the eyes of some ancient predator awakening from slumber. Impossible, breathed his tactical officer. Our sensors show nothing. No energy signature, no mass readings, no gravitational displacement. It's like the ship doesn't exist, even though we can see it. Kethvar's mind raced. No known technology in the galaxy could achieve complete sensor invisibility while maintaining visual stealth. The best cloaking devices could fool either sensors or visual detection, but never both simultaneously. What he was seeing violated every law of physics he understood. Sir, the communications officer reported with trembling voice. We're receiving a transmission from the unknown vessel. Put it through, Kethvar ordered, though his usual confidence had evaporated. The view screen split, showing both Captain Chen and a new figure, a human male in a black uniform unlike anything Kethvar had seen before. The man's face was calm, almost serene, but his eyes held depths that spoke of experiences far beyond his apparent age. Greetings, Admiral Kethvar, the stranger said in perfect Zephyrian. I am Commander Marcus Webb of the UES times Shadow of Earth *. You seem to be threatening our medical convoy. Kethvar found his voice. This is Zephyrian space. You have no authority here, and your ship, whatever it is outnumbered 200 to 1. Commander Webb smiled, and somehow that expression was more unsettling than any threat could have been. Admiral, you mentioned that humans have only been in space for 3 centuries. That's true, but what you don't know is how we've spent those 3 centuries. The massive black ship began to move, gliding between the Zephyrian fleet and the human convoy with impossible grace. Despite its enormous size, it moved like a dancer, every motion precise and purposeful. While your empire has rested on the achievements of your ancestors, Webb continued, we humans have been doing what we do best, adapting, innovating, and preparing for the day when our compassion would be tested by those who mistake kindness for weakness. Kethvar's sensors still showed nothing where the ship obviously was. His targeting systems couldn't lock onto it, as if the vessel existed in a different dimension entirely. The impossibility of it made his head spin. You want to know what humans learned in our short time among the stars, Admiral? Captain Chen spoke up, her earlier exhaustion replaced by steel determination. We learned that the galaxy is full of ancient empires that believe age equals wisdom, that power justifies cruelty, and that compassion is a luxury they can't afford. Commander Webb's voice carried across both ships as the times Shadow of Earth times took position directly in front of the Zephyrian fleet. We also learned that sometimes the only way to protect the innocent is to remind the galaxy why Earth's children should never be underestimated. The black ship's weapon ports began to glow with an energy unlike anything Kethvar had ever seen. Not the familiar blue-white of plasma cannons, or the crimson of laser arrays, but something that seemed to bend light itself, creating patterns that hurt to look at directly. Impossible, Kethvar whispered. No human ship could stand against my entire fleet. Webb's expression never changed. Admiral, your empire has ruled through fear and superior numbers for 5,000 years. You've never faced an enemy that could match your technology, so you've never needed to evolve beyond what worked in the past. The times Shadow of Earth times suddenly accelerated, moving faster than any ship its size should be able to travel. In seconds, it had positioned itself within the heart of the Zephyrian formation, surrounded by enemy vessels on all sides. But humans, Webb said, as his ship came to a stop. Weapon arrays, now targeting multiple Zephyrian vessels simultaneously, We've had to evolve every single day just to survive. And now, you're about to learn what 3 centuries of human innovation looks like when applied to the art of war. Admiral Kethvar stared at the impossible ship that had appeared from nowhere, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. In all his years of conquest, he had never encountered anything like this. The confidence that had carried him through countless victories began to crack as he realized he might be facing something entirely beyond his understanding. The battle for the Terminus Nebula was about to begin, but for the first time in his career, Admiral Kethvar wasn't certain he would be the one dictating its outcome. Commander Marcus Webb stood on the bridge of the Times Shadow of Earth *, watching the Zephyrian fleet react to his ship's sudden appearance. The alien officers scrambled at their stations, trying desperately to make sense of sensor readings that told them nothing useful. He could see Admiral Kethvar on the main screen, the 4 armed warrior's confidence visibly cracking as he struggled to understand what he faced. "Tactical report," Webb ordered calmly. 200 enemy vessels in standard attack formation," replied Lieutenant Commander Sarah Park, his tactical officer. "Composition includes 47 dreadnoughts, 81 cruisers, and 72 destroyers. All ships showing full power signatures and active weapon systems. Defense status? Phantom protocols engaged and holding steady," reported the chief engineer from his station. "We're completely invisible to their sensors across all spectrums. Visual distortion field is active, making us appear as background space to their optical systems." Webb nodded. The Phantom-class stealth technology had taken Earth's best minds 50 years to develop, building on principles that the galaxy's older civilizations had dismissed as impossible. While empires like the Zephyrians had perfected traditional shield and weapon technologies, humanity had focused on what others considered theoretical impossibilities. "Admiral Kethvar," Webb addressed the alien commander directly, "I want you to understand something important. This isn't about superiority or ancient rights to rule. It's about what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object." The Zephyrian admiral's mandibles clicked in anger. "Your tricks may be impressive, human, but you're still one ship against my entire fleet. Even if our weapons can't lock onto you properly, we can saturate the space around you with enough firepower to destroy anything." "You're thinking like someone who's never had to fight a truly desperate battle," Webb replied. "Your empire has always had the luxury of overwhelming force. But humanity learned to fight when we were outnumbered from day one." On his orders, the Times Shadow of Earth Times began to move through the Zephyrian formation. The massive vessel slipped between enemy ships like smoke, its movement defying every tactical manual ever written. Traditional naval doctrine said that large ships were slow and vulnerable when surrounded, but the human vessel moved with impossible agility. "Open fire," Kethvar commanded. The Zephyrian fleet unleashed a barrage that would have obliterated a dozen normal vessels. Plasma beams, particle cannons, and quantum torpedoes filled space with deadly energy. But the Times Shadow of Earth Times seemed to dance between the attacks, moving in 3 dimensions with fluid grace. "How?" gasped Kethvar, as his flagship's weapons passed through empty space where the human ship had been moments before. "Predictive combat algorithms," Webb explained casually as his ship continued its impossible maneuvers. "We analyzed every major battle fought in this galaxy over the past millennium. Your tactics, your weapons patterns, your response times, we've studied it all." The truth was even more impressive than Webb let on. The Times Shadow of Earth Times wasn't just evading randomly. Its quantum computers were calculating the probability of each Zephyrian weapon's firing solution in real time, allowing the ship to be somewhere else before the enemy had even decided where to aim. "Impossible," Kethvar breathed. "No computer can process that much data that quickly." "You're right," Webb agreed. "No computer the galaxy knows about can do that. But you're forgetting something important about humans, Admiral." "What?" Webb agreed. Webb agreed. Webb agreed as elements signed. Webb agreed as elements. Webb agreed. Webb agreed as elements. Webb agreed as elements signed. Webb agreed as elements signed. The Times Shadow of Earth Times suddenly stopped moving, hovering motionless in the center of the enemy formation. For a moment, the Zephyrians thought they finally had a clear target. Every ship in the fleet began charging their weapons for a coordinated strike. "We don't build technology like everyone else," Webb continued. "When other species hit a wall, they accept it as a limitation. When humans hit a wall, we find a way to go through it, around it, over it, or under it. And sometimes, we just decide the wall doesn't exist." The human ship's weapon arrays suddenly came to life. But instead of the familiar energy patterns the galaxy knew, they produced something entirely new. Beams of twisted space-time lanced out from the time's shadow of Earth asterisk, striking a dozen Zephyrian vessels simultaneously. The effects were immediate and terrifying. The struck ships didn't explode or burn, they simply stopped existing in conventional space. Their hulls became translucent, their crews visible but unable to affect the physical world around them. They had been shifted into a parallel dimensional phase, alive but completely helpless. "What have you done to my ships?" Kethvar roared. "Phase displacement weapons," Webb replied matter-of-factly. "Your crews are perfectly safe, just temporarily removed from this reality. They'll return to normal space in about 6 hours, completely unharmed but very confused." More Zephyrian ships opened fire, but the time's shadow of Earth times had resumed its impossible dance. Each time they thought they had it cornered, the human vessel would somehow slip away, often appearing behind the attacking ships before they realized what had happened. "This is why your empire is about to learn a very important lesson," Webb said as his ship systematically disabled more enemy vessels. "You've spent 5,000 years perfecting the same basic technologies. Bigger guns, stronger shields, faster engines, all incremental improvements on what you already knew." Another dozen Zephyrian ships flickered out of phase as the human vessel's weapons found their marks. The remaining fleet began to spread out, trying to avoid the devastating effect. But it only made them easier targets for the time's shadow of Earth's time's impossible maneuverability. "Meanwhile," Webb continued, "humanity has been asking different questions. Not how do we make this better, but what if we're thinking about this completely wrong? Not how do we improve our shields, but what if we don't need shields because we can't be hit in the first place?" Kethvar watched in growing horror as his supposedly overwhelming fleet was systematically neutralized by a single enemy vessel. His tactical officers reported complete sensor failure. They couldn't track the human ship, couldn't predict its movements, couldn't even maintain target locks for more than a few seconds. "Sir," his communications officer reported with trembling voice, "we're receiving surrender demands from some of our own ships. The crews that have been phase-shifted are requesting permission to abandon ship." "Denied," Kethvar snapped. "We don't surrender to a single enemy vessel, Admiral." Webb's voice carried a note of genuine sadness. "You're not listening. This isn't about one ship versus your fleet. This is about two completely different approaches to warfare, and yours is obsolete." The time's shadow of Earth time suddenly split into multiple images, each one moving independently through the Zephyrian formation. Kethvar's sensors showed 5 identical human vessels, then 10, then 20. "Holographic multiplication combined with quantum displacement," Webb explained as his apparent fleet of ghost ships continued their deadly work. "Each projection is backed by real weapons fire through dimensional tunneling. You're not fighting one ship, Admiral, you're fighting one ship that exists in 20 different locations simultaneously." The Zephyrian fleet's coordination completely collapsed as commanders tried to target enemies that might or might not be real. Ships fired on their own allies, confused by the multiple images that seemed to flicker in and out of existence. "How many of your people have to disappear into phase space before you understand?" Webb asked, as another wave of Zephyrian vessels flickered out of normal reality. "Your empire has spent millennia believing that age equals wisdom, that experience equals superiority. But what happens when you meet someone who has been preparing specifically to fight people exactly like you?" Kethvar realized with growing terror that nearly half his fleet had been neutralized, and the human ship showed no signs of slowing down. Worse, his remaining vessels were becoming increasingly uncoordinated as their captains lost confidence in their ability to fight an enemy they couldn't understand. "This is impossible," he said, more to himself than to anyone else. "We have the finest weapons in the galaxy, the most advanced ships, the most experienced crews, You have the finest weapons the galaxy knew about until today, Webb corrected. The most advanced ships using yesterday's technology. The most experienced crews fighting tomorrow's war with yesterday's tactics. The truth was becoming undeniable. The human ship wasn't just defeating the Zephyrian fleet, it was making them look primitive in the process. Every assumption about space warfare that had held true for millennia was being systematically destroyed by technology that seemed to operate by entirely different rules. Your empire has ruled through fear and superior numbers, Webb continued as the Time's Shadow of Earth Times disabled another group of enemy vessels with contemptuous ease. But what happens when you meet an enemy that isn't afraid, and for whom numbers don't matter? Kethvar stared at the tactical display, showing his fleet's rapid dissolution. In 30 years of commanding Imperial forces, he had never faced anything remotely like this. The human vessel was rewriting the rules of engagement in real time, demonstrating capabilities that shouldn't exist, according to everything he thought he knew about physics and warfare. "Sir," his tactical officer reported with obvious panic in his voice, "we have less than 80 combat-effective ships remaining. Recommend immediate withdrawal." "No," Kethvar said grimly. "If we retreat now, word will spread throughout the galaxy. The Empire's reputation for invincibility will be destroyed by a single human ship." But even as he spoke, Kethvar knew the truth. The reputation was already destroyed. The question now was whether he could salvage anything from this disaster. And more importantly, whether the galaxy was ready for what humanity had apparently become while everyone else was looking the other way. The Time's Shadow of Earth Times continued its deadly work. Each movement a demonstration that the balance of power in the galaxy had just shifted in ways no one had seen coming. Admiral Kethvar watched his remaining ships scatter in growing panic as the impossible human vessel continued its methodical destruction of everything he had built his reputation on. The Time's Shadow of Earth Times moved through his fleet, like death itself, untouchable and unstoppable, systematically removing his ships from normal space with weapons that shouldn't exist. "Sir," his tactical officer reported with barely controlled terror, "we now have only 47 ships still in normal space. The others aren't destroyed, but they're gone. Our entire third battle group just flickered out of existence." Commander Webb's voice carried across the comm with the same unsettling calm he had maintained throughout the battle. "Admiral, your crews are safe. Every single one of them will return to normal space in a few hours, completely unharmed. But I need you to understand something very important about what's happening here." Kethvar's mandibles clicked in frustrated rage. "What could you possibly need to explain? You've humiliated the finest fleet in the Imperial Navy with impossible technology." "That's exactly what I need to explain," Webb replied, as the Time's Shadow of Earth Times appeared directly in front of Kethvar's flagship, close enough that the Admiral could see individual details on its hull. "This isn't about humiliation, and it's not about impossible technology." The human ship hung motionless in space, no longer bothering to dodge the increasingly desperate fire from the remaining Zephyrian vessels. Energy beams passed harmlessly through it, as if the massive warship existed in a different dimension entirely. "For the past 3 centuries," Webb continued, "humanity has been the galaxy's underdog. Every time we tried to help someone, establish trade relationships, or simply explore new territories, we ran into empires like yours that had already decided we didn't belong." Captain Chen's voice joined the conversation from her convoy. "We came here to deliver medical supplies to save millions of lives. Your response was to threaten us with complete annihilation. That tells us everything we need to know about how the galaxy's older civilizations view human compassion." Kethvar found himself listening despite his fury. There was something in the human voices, not triumph, but a deep sadness that he hadn't expected. "Every time we tried to negotiate, you told us we were too young to understand galactic politics," Webb said as his ship began to move again, slipping through the Zephyrian formation like a ghost. "Every time we offered assistance, you said we were naive idealists who didn't comprehend the complexities of interstellar relations." More Zephyrian ships flickered out of normal space as the phase displacement weapons found their targets. Kethvar realized that within minutes, his entire fleet would be neutralized, and there was absolutely nothing he could do to stop it. So we stopped trying to convince you with words, Webb continued. Instead, we prepared for the day when our compassion would be tested by those who mistake kindness for weakness. And today is that day. The truth hit Kethvar like a physical blow. The human ship wasn't just using advanced technology, it was demonstrating the culmination of centuries of preparation specifically for this type of encounter. Every innovation, every breakthrough, every seemingly impossible advancement had been designed with one goal in mind: protecting human humanitarian missions from exactly this kind of overwhelming force. You've been planning this, he breathed. All of it. The technology, the tactics, the timing. You've been preparing specifically to fight empires like mine. Not to fight, Webb corrected gently. Admiral. And it's more important than you realize. The Times, Shadow of Earth Times, suddenly stopped its attack, hovering motionless in the center of what remained of the Zephyrian fleet. Around it, the phase-shifted ships flickered like ghosts, their crews visible but unable to interact with normal space. Every weapon system on this ship was designed for non-lethal neutralization, Webb explained. Every defensive measure was created to avoid combat, rather than win it. Every tactical innovation was developed to protect the innocent, rather than destroy the enemy. Kethvar stared at the readings from his science officer. Despite the devastating effectiveness of the human attack, not a single Zephyrian had been killed. The phase displacement weapons had simply removed his ships from the battle without harming anyone aboard them. Impossible, he whispered. You could have destroyed my entire fleet in the first minutes of engagement. Why didn't you? Captain Chen's image appeared on his screen alongside Webb's. Because that's not who we are, Admiral. We don't believe that might makes right, or that superior technology gives us the authority to decide who lives or dies. But we also won't let anyone stop us from helping those who need it, Webb added with steel in his voice. Your empire has spent 5,000 years perfecting the art of conquest. We've spent 300 years perfecting the art of protection. The remaining Zephyrian ships had stopped firing, their captains apparently realizing the futility of attacking an enemy they couldn't hit with weapons that couldn't harm it. The tactical display showed a scattered formation of confused and demoralized vessels, surrounding a single human ship that had redefined everything they thought they knew about warfare. Here's what's going to happen, Webb said, his tone shifting to one of absolute authority. My ship will escort Captain Chen's convoy to Corvani Prime, where they will deliver their medical supplies and save as many lives as possible. Your fleet will remain in phase displacement until we've completed our mission. And then? Kethvar asked, dreading the answer. And then your ships will return to normal space. Your crews will be completely unharmed, and you'll all go home, Webb replied simply. But you'll carry a message with you, Admiral. Not from Earth's military, but from Earth's people. The main screen shifted to show a view of Corvani Prime in the distance, where the plague was claiming thousands of lives every hour that passed. The contrast between the suffering world and the military standoff in space seemed to emphasize the absurdity of prioritizing conquest over compassion. The message is this, Captain Chen said, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who had seen too much suffering. The galaxy doesn't have to be the way it's always been. Empires don't have to rule through fear, and strength doesn't have to mean the ability to destroy your enemies. Humanity offers a different path, Webb added. We're not interested in conquering worlds or building empires. We want to explore, to learn, to help where we can, and to be left alone to live according to our own values. Kethvar processed what he was hearing with growing amazement. These humans had just demonstrated military capabilities that could probably conquer half the known galaxy, and they were using that power to deliver medical supplies to a plague-stricken world. But, Webb's voice hardened, if anyone tries to stop us from following that path, if anyone threatens our people, or the innocent we're trying to protect, they'll discover that 3 centuries of human innovation has produced more than just defensive technologies. The implication was clear. The Times, Shadow of Earth Times, was just one ship, but it represented capabilities that could revolutionize warfare throughout the galaxy. If humanity could build one such vessel, They could build hundreds. If they could phase shift entire fleets out of normal space, what other impossible technologies were they keeping in reserve? Your empire has a choice to make, Captain Chen said, as her convoy began moving toward the planet below. You can continue trying to rule through fear and superior numbers, knowing that there are now forces in the galaxy that make those advantages meaningless. Or you can consider the possibility that cooperation might serve your people better than conquest. The Time's Shadow of Earth Times began to move, escorting the medical ships toward Corvani Prime, while the phase-shifted Zephyrian vessels flickered like ghosts in its wake. Kethvar watched helplessly as his supposedly overwhelming fleet was reduced to the role of spectator in a humanitarian mission they had tried to prevent. This changes everything, his tactical officer whispered. Yes, Kethvar replied grimly. It does. As the human ships disappeared toward the suffering planet below, Admiral Kethvar contemplated the message he would carry back to the Imperial Council. For 5,000 years, the Zephyrian Empire had ruled through military superiority and the threat of overwhelming force. Now they faced the possibility that their entire model of galactic governance had become obsolete overnight. But perhaps more disturbing than humanity's military capabilities was their restraint in using them. Any other species with such power would have used it to carve out their own empire, to demand tribute and submission from weaker civilizations. Instead, the humans had used it to protect a medical convoy. Hours later, as his phase-shifted ships began to flicker back into normal space, Kethvar received reports from Corvani Prime. The human medical supplies were already taking effect, and casualty rates from the plague were dropping dramatically. Within days, the crisis would be over, and millions of lives would be saved. The galaxy had indeed been stunned, but not in the way anyone had expected. A secret human warship had emerged from Cloak in the heart of battle, but instead of bringing destruction, it had brought the possibility of a future where power was measured not by the ability to destroy, but by the will to protect. And across the known worlds, as word of the engagement spread, ancient empires began to reconsider what it meant to be truly strong in a galaxy where humanity had finally revealed what 3 centuries of desperate innovation could achieve.